Focus on Headline. And let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. For this, joining us in the studio today, we have our reporters in Chung Ye-in and Yoon Hae-jung. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening.
Happy Labor Day to you guys. Happy May Day, although we are, as freelancers, working very hard on this Labor Day. Speaking of which, the heart of Seoul, Central Seoul, certainly buzzing with numerous labor group rallies. Happens on an annual basis here. Labor Day is not just a day for those that work in different sectors to take a day off, but also raise awareness on some of the labor rights, union rights, and so forth. You saw major gatherings and marches seen across the city urging better protection of workers' rights. Yain, you're going to start us off with what happened throughout the day today.
Sure. So celebrating this day known as May Day or Labor Day, the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, or KCTU in short, kicked off their 2024 World Labor Day conference in front of the Donghwa duty-free shop in Central Seoul. Now, organizers estimated that about 25,000 attendees have filled the streets from the departure point all the way to Deoksugung Palace, a stretch of roughly 600 meters. And the KCTU used this anniversary to amplify their calls for the resignation of the president, advocating for universal labor rights for all workers, passing the so-called yellow envelope law, and a raise in the minimum wage. Now, in the meantime, the Federation of Korean Trade Unions, or FKTU, held their National Workers' Rally for the 134th anniversary of World Labor Day. That was held near the National Assembly in Yeongdeungpo District. So the organizers estimated there around 8,000 participants were gathered to push for similar amendments, the implementation of a 4-day work week, and the halt of differential minimum wage applications. Now, disability rights activists from the Solidarity Against Disability Discrimination, or SADD or SAD, also marked the day with demonstrations. So, starting early at Gwanghwamun Station with a dramatic rally, so-called Die-In demonstration. They demonstrated by lying down on the ground to call for a withdrawal of dismissal of disabled workers. And after that, they later joined the KCTU's rally. In the meantime, President Yoon Suk-yeol took to social media to celebrate Labor Day, pledging to protect the value of labor and ensure safer and fairer workplaces for all workers, emphasizing his government's commitment to enhancing the quality of life through improved labor conditions.
At the start of the Yoon administration, one of the biggest tasks that he had at the start of his administration was this battle between the Yoon administration, the government, and the trade unions. And we talked about the two trade unions here, KCTU, as well as the FKTU. These are the two major umbrella labor groups out there. Now, one bit more hardline than the other, but the big clash was over the truckers union, right? Over the truckers. And at that time, there was a lot of rallies going on. The Yoon administration still pushing hard. But at the same time, at that time, I believe it was the public sentiment was leaning towards what the government was doing. And so their approval rating was going up quite a bit and they were doing it well. It's not, the government had all the rights at the time to, I think, fight against the labor union at the time. But because of that initial clash at the start of the Yoon administration, there's been a lot of criticism towards the government that they're kind of going against all the labor unions. And so there's always been this clash, as you know. Now there is the huge clash with the medical community as well. I believe the Green Justice Party, which initially the were kind of centered on labor rights. A lot of the lawmakers there, previous lawmakers centered on labor rights, they also did a sit-in at Central Seoul. So a lot of different rallies that took place. But being that today is Labor Day, I want to kind of talk about a certain study here that showed that nearly 1 out of every 4 workers went to work on Labor Day. 37% of them will not receive holiday pay or compensatory time off. Hae-jung, let's get more on this.
Right. Incrude, a Korean HR tech company, surveyed 1,076 employees last Tuesday through Wednesday, just a few days ahead of Labor Day. Now, in this survey, 24.3% of respondents said they will be working on Labor Day, and this is an on-year decrease by 6.1 percentage points compared to the same survey conducted last year, when 30.4% of the respondents said they would be working on Labor Day. By company size, 41.3% of workers in companies with less than 5 employees said they work on Labor Day, followed by public enterprises and public institutions, marking 29.5%, and SMEs and medium-sized enterprises, both marking 22.2%, and 14.9% of employees in large enterprises said they work on Labor Day. But technically, Labor Day is a paid holiday that all workers are entitled to under the Labor Standards Act, regardless of the size of the business or industry. Now, when asking workers if their company provides holiday pay or compensatory time off, 37.2% said no and 37.5% said yes, while 25.3% of the respondents said they didn't know. The satisfaction rate for the company people are working for averaged 6.1 out of 10. By size, public sector employees were the most satisfied, giving a 6.7 for their workplace, while SME employees were the least satisfied, giving their offices a 5.9. But regardless of company size, the number one thing employees wanted from their company the most was more or bigger bonuses, which took up 33.2% of the respondents' answers. This was followed by more employee benefits, 19%, and a reasonable HR evaluation system marking 10.3%.
Reasonable HR evaluation system. And what kind of complaints are they getting from the HR? We all know there's always the big jokes, right? The joke that no one's friends with anyone from the HR. Hope no one from the HR is listening to this right now. But it's interesting, these figures right now, because I've always thought also that most people take day off on Labor Day. And then I was actually surprised that I got some kind of delivery. Something that I ordered yesterday was being delivered today by one of the major delivery companies. And then of course, curiosity struck. And then I said, how come these people are delivering? Certain delivery workers are either contract workers, right? They're not full-time workers. And so because of that, they don't take the day off. And it's only, the government post office, right, that takes the day off because they are part of the government affiliated postal service there. Let's talk about other issues here. In yesterday's emergency economic ministerial meeting at the government complex in Seoul, the government announced its new social mobility improvement plan, which is set to enhance the economic dynamism aligned with the Deputy Prime Minister's vision laid out upon his inauguration. Yane, let's get more on this.
Sure. So the key highlight of this government plan that was announced yesterday was the introduction of the so-called All Care platform. Now, this aims to provide job information and consultation services in a timely manner, particularly focusing on job seekers and the so-called NEET population, or NEET, standing for those not in education, employment, or training. Now, for one, the government plans to integrate the Education Ministry's student database and the Labor Ministry's employment insurance database in order to provide employment services to college students more effectively. For instance, about 1.41 million national scholarship applicants could soon receive job information and consultation services upon agreeing when applying for these scholarships. Also, the plan targets private companies to provide job training programs directly to these job seekers. Now, for our female workforces, the government is setting measures to prevent career interruptions. So, for instance, maternity leave, those benefits are currently capped at 80% of regular wages, up to 1.5 million won per month, and this will see a phased increase. Now, there's also an expansion in the eligibility as well as the duration of the reduced work hours for parental duties from the child age of 8 to 12 going forward, and parents can utilize this benefit for up to 36 months per parent. Paternity leave will double from the current 10 working days to 20 working days, which is roughly a month off for new fathers, aligning with efforts to promote shared parental responsibilities. Now, as for the support for reemployment of the workers whose career has already been interrupted, the government will abolish the restrictions on the types of businesses for which women who are eligible for the so-called reemployment tax credit, while also allowing male workers to benefit from such policies as well. Now, currently, it is only available to those who apply to the same company or one within the same industry as the one that they have worked for before. And besides the plan laid out today, the government plans to release the second round of response measures during the second half of this year.
Yeah, I mean, there is a growing number of the so-called NEET population, right? Every time we talk about the economic figures, we talk about the employment figures, there's always a rise, on-year rise of number of people being employed within the 60-plus age group, which only means that there are part-time jobs. These are like, for example, like greeters at these supermarkets, or they do the smaller part-time jobs, or even at the convenience stores. And you're seeing a huge decline in jobs for those in their 20s and 30s. And now they're even saying that there was a decline for employment for those in their 40s, which, I mean, that's really a cause for concern here. But especially the young students, we've talked about how South Korea is now becoming one of the more educated countries in the world, where a lot of them are going to universities, and then they've gone through all those studies, all those academies, all those years in high school preparing for Sunyoung, and now it's time to get a job, and they're unable to get any of that stuff. And so not only are they not even in training, they're not even studying, they're just not able to get any jobs, and you're seeing a huge a NEET population right now. And I think there's growing calls to help the youth population right now to get those jobs. Moving on here, speaking of figures, South Korea recording export growth for the 7th consecutive month. In the month of April, keeping the trade balance in the black for nearly a year. Now, robust performances in export for cars and chips were the main drivers. Hejun, let's get the figures on this.
Sure. According to data released by the Trade Ministry on Wednesday, South Korea's exports extended on-year gains for 7 consecutive months in April, backed by a robust chip demand, with shipments of automobiles also setting a fresh high. Exports increased 13.8% on year to total $56.2 billion last month, and the monthly export growth rate has been showing a positive trend for 7 consecutive months since October last year. Imports gained 5.4% on year to $54.7 billion last month, resulting in a trade surplus of $1.53 billion. Now, South Korea has been maintaining a trade surplus for 11 consecutive months. By sector, exports from the IT sector, including chips, displays, computers, and wireless devices, all saw increases for the 2nd consecutive month. Exports of chips soared 56.1% on year to reach $9.96 billion, maintaining growth for 6 straight months. Outbound shipments of display products also gained 16.3% over the period to reach $1.43 billion. Meanwhile, car exports, which had shown a negative trend in February and March due to slowing sales of electric vehicles, turned positive in April, reaching an all-time high, rising 10.3% on year to reach $6.79 billion in April, surpassing the previous record of $6.53 billion posted in November 2023. Other major gainers included petroleum, auto parts, and petrochemical products. By destination, exports to the U.S. increased for the 9th month in a row, setting a fresh record at $11.4 billion in April, which is up 24.3% from a year earlier. Exports to China also moved up 9.9% over the period to mark $10.5 billion. In the meantime, the value of imports into South Korea also rose by more than 5% on year last month to around $54.7 billion, resulting in a trade surplus of $1.53 billion. Now, that's the 11th consecutive month the country has seen a trade surplus since June 2023. And the cumulative trade balance for January through April this year was $10.6 billion, achieving the largest surplus in 5 years.
Yeah, it's good to see that the export figures are continuing to soar, especially because finally Samsung Electronics, their chip business, returned to profit in the first quarter of this year for the first time in 5 quarters. And things were pretty slow before the first quarter of this year. And when you're talking about a major company like Samsung Electronics, this is big stuff. And also because Samsung was not profiting during the previous 5 quarters, they're not paying any corporate tax. And we talked about the tax revenue shortfall that the country has been facing for quite a bit now. But the other positive aspect here, I mean, you would kind of always want a trade surplus, right? I mean, more exports going out than imports coming in. But if you look at it in the previous quarters and over the past few years, or over the past year or so, the reason why there was a huge trade surplus was because the lack of import resulting from more the lack of consumer demand. People were not spending money. Was what it is. So if there's no demand for certain stuff, they're not going to need to import anything. And so seeing a kind of a slight rebound in the import figures, but still resulting in a trade surplus, I think it's an overall very positive number and some positive signals for the South Korean economy. And we've talked about how it has been quite slow. We're hoping for a rebound in the second half of the year. Let's also look at some recent updates from Standard & Poor's regarding South Korea's credit outlook. S&P reaffirmed that South Korea's long-term sovereign credit rating at AA and the short-term rating at A1 positive. A1 plus. So these ratings have been maintained with a stable outlook is what we're looking at here. Yane, let's get the latest on this.
Sure. So it is noteworthy that this is actually the first rating announcement for South Korea by S&P in 2 years since April 2022. Now, the reaffirmation is significant as it reflects S&P's confidence in the Korean economy's stability as well as its continued growth. Now, since elevating South Korea's rating from AA minus to AA in August 2016, S&P has consistently upheld this rating. Now, on the economic front, S&P projects South Korea's GDP growth rate at 2.2% for this year, adding that growth will hover around or slightly exceed 2% annually over the next 3 years. Now, this year's per capita GDP is estimated at around $35,000. Inflation, which stood at 3.6% last year, is expected to decrease to 2.6% this year. Now, furthermore, fiscal health is anticipated to improve starting next year, potentially reaching a balanced finance by 2027, with general government fiscal balance estimated at about negative 1% of GDP. Now, on geopolitical risks, particularly related to North Korea, S&P noted the potential contingent liabilities risk associated with the cost of unification should there be a regime collapse in the North. However, they believe that the recent geopolitical landscape has not escalated to a level that seriously undermines the economic foundation of South Korea. Now, in response to this release, the Ministry of Economy and Finance welcomed this rating announcement, viewing it as a reaffirmation of robust confidence in the Korean economy. They highlighted the strong growth prospects as well as solid external soundness of the economy, highly regarded by S&P. Now, prior to this announcement, there was actually a meeting on April 19th in Washington, D.C. between Deputy Prime Minister Choi Sang-mok and Roberto Saifon Arevalo, that's S&P's global head of sovereign ratings. So the ministry has expressed commitment to maintaining this kind of close communication with international credit rating agencies in order to actively update the country's economic conditions and policy directions.
Yeah, it's interesting that they noted the potential contingent liabilities risk associated with the cost of unification. But that cost of unification doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden there's peace on the Korean Peninsula and here is unification. It also could mean that in case of, let's say, I don't know, a coup that happens in North Korea, or even a wartime situation where, North Korea ends up losing, Kim Jong-un ends up losing its power, and it's, kind of through that it gets unified. There's a whole different thing, but currently at this time, I think that's something that's probably not going to happen anytime in the near future, so probably don't have to worry about that. Guys, let's talk about this ongoing rift with the government and the medical community. We did briefly mention this yesterday. Today is the start of a new leadership within the Korean Medical Association, as you now have the new president there, Lee Hyun-taek. He is known as a hardliner against the government's planned medical admissions quota. He vowed on Wednesday, on the start of his leadership, to resolve the ongoing standoff with the government over the medical school quota hike and the prolonged walkout by junior doctors to alleviate concerns among patients and the people. Now, the big question is how? Haejong, you have the latest on this.
The new hardline executive board of the Korean Medical Association took office today, and the group's new president, beginning his 3-year term, Lee Hyun-taek, is expected to push the government hard. Lim finished first among 5 candidates in the first round of voting for the 42nd president of the Major Doctors Association, which was held in March, and then won 65.4% of the votes in a 2-way runoff election held afterwards, securing his seat as president of the KMA. Lim, who had previously lost a bid to become the 41st president of the association, has repeatedly slammed the government on his campaign trail, which may have led to his winning in the most recent election. So the new chief is widely expected to take a tough stance against the government. Even before being elected, he had insisted that the government needs to slash seats at the medical schools by up to 1,000, given the country's low birth rate. And upon being elected in March, he demanded President Yoon Suk-yeol's apology and the dismissal of the health minister as preconditions for dialogue with the government. During a general meeting with the KMA delegates on Sunday, Lee Hyun-taek vowed to ward off any wrongful policies to the death and stand firm and resolute. Lim also recently finalized the appointment of a new executive board. In particular, as the government has been reviewing various legal procedures on collective action by doctors, Lim has increased the number of lawyers on its board from the usual 2 to 4 in order to ramp up legal services for its members. Now, Lee Hyun-taek's first day in office coincided with Labor Day, so he is set to hold an inauguration ceremony tomorrow and then kick off his official activities as president of the KMA. Right away, he plans to prepare dialogue with the government by performing a pan-medical council with professors, doctors, and med school students.
Yeah, basically they're saying, we want more people on our side than your side because the Special Presidential Committee on Medical Reform, he's saying, majority of them are based on people who are going to side with you, the government, and so instead we're going to be forming another group here that we are inviting you to take part of, but it's going to have more of us. The argument here, right? 1,000 given the country's low birth rate, but low birth rate also means that we're an aging society. And one thing that you learn, and even I'm starting to feel now, even though I'm still in my 30s, is the older you get, the more times you end up going to the hospital. The aging society means that there's going to be more people who need doctors, right? And so I don't really understand this argument, to be honest with you, but it doesn't seem as hardline as Kura's chief, Park Dan, who just said, didn't even, go with 1,000. He said, scrap it completely is what he said. So hopefully, though, with a change in the leadership, despite his hardline stance, we do hope that there is some sort of dialogue, which has been lacking more than 2 months now. Disease control authorities have announced a downgrade in the COVID-19 alert level this morning to alert to attention, marking a significant relaxation in virus-related restrictions. Yena, tell us what changes we'll see from this downgrade.
Of course. So the key change would be that the remaining mandate for mask wearing in major hospitals has now been lifted, transitioning to a recommendation. So this change is effective as of today, and it is aligned with the easing of several other health safety measures that were in place during the pandemic. Now, the COVID-19 Central Countermeasure Headquarters had previously signaled this kind of reduction in alert levels earlier on the 19th, and this is the lowest crisis level since the pandemic began after we transitioned through levels from critical to now alert 11 months ago. Now, alongside the lifting of these mask-wearing mandates, preemptive testing requirements in facilities like nursing homes have also shifted from mandatory to recommended. Now, this adjustment indicates a broader move towards normalcy where personal responsibility and caution are encouraged rather than enforced through regulations. Additionally, guidelines for the isolation of COVID-19 patients have been relaxed. Now, previously, a 5-day isolation was advised from the day when an individual was tested positive. Now, however, if symptoms like fever or cough improve, isolation can be reduced to just 24 hours after the symptoms are gone. Now, on the financial side, the routine support for COVID-19 testing costs will cease, except for rapid antigen tests for symptomatic individuals in specific groups, that being patients in medically underserved areas, emergency room visitors, and ICU patients, with costs partially supported between 6,000 won to 9,000 won. Now, changes are also in place for the distribution of oral COVID-19 treatments like Paxlovid, which will no longer be fully funded by the government. Now, instead, there will be a charge of 50,000 won per person, although exemptions will remain for medical aid recipients and the underprivileged classes. Regarding vaccinations, the government will continue to offer free COVID-19 vaccines to all citizens for the 2023 and 2024 season. After this period, however, free vaccinations will be limited to high-risk groups, including the elderly over 65 and those with compromised immune systems.
And so right now what we're seeing is what we assumed was going to happen eventually when we transition into this endemic phase. It's not like COVID-19 is done and over with. There is still... I don't even know what variation they're up to now. I think they, what was it? They had like alpha, right? And then they had all sorts of different variations, and then they went to like, I think the last one was like J.1. And again, I mean, we've lost count because there's so many different variations right now. Lorelei over in Alabama says we still have COVID here in Alabama. I work at a doctor's office. I mean, but that's the thing. But what we've transitioned is what we're treating COVID-19 is like a typical flu, right? I mean, we've had flus, but we were told that we should probably stay at home. We're told that we get medication. Those in the high risk group are given Tamiflu, right? What is it? There's free vaccination for flu shots for the senior citizens and the vulnerable group. And this is what we're seeing right now. But we've gotten to the point, I think, right now, because there were so many different measures put in place that we're now almost, it seems like we're free from COVID, and we could finally accept this change right now. And it's unbelievable that we went through 3 years of this, and we've reached the end of the tunnel. Moving on here, South Korea and Australia holding their 2+2 meeting. This involving their foreign and defense ministers in Melbourne on Wednesday local time to discuss South Korea's possible participation in the AUKUS security alliance. AUKUS, of course, a combination of US, UK, and Australia. Haejung, let's get the latest details of this.
Right. The 2+2 talks, the 6th Korea-Australia Foreign Affairs and Defense Ministerial Meeting, involved South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol and Defense Minister Shin Won-sik, as well as Foreign Minister Penny Wong and Defense Minister Richard Marles on the Australian side. The meeting was held 2 years and 8 months after the 5th meeting in Seoul in September 2021. The following session had had initially been scheduled for October last year, but it was canceled amid tensions in the Middle East that prompted countries to attend to the urgency of the situation. According to Defense Minister Shin Won-sik, South Korea's potential participation of the AUKUS security partnership was among the agenda items discussed during the 2+2 meeting. Defense Minister Shin made the remarks during a joint press conference after the meeting and said they exchanged views on cooperation between South Korea and the Pillar 2 of the alliance. For some background, AUKUS consists of two key pillars. Pillar 1 is to support Australia in acquiring conventionally armed, nuclear-powered submarines, while Pillar 2 is for cooperation in high-tech areas including quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and hypersonics. The AUKUS partnership, which was launched in September 2021 to keep China in check, has drawn attention in Korea after a U.S. official in March mentioned South Korea and Japan as potential partners that are being considered by AUKUS members to cooperate in Pillar 2. Seoul's defense minister said that we do welcome that the AUKUS members are considering Korea as a Pillar 2 partner and that Korea's differentiated science and technology capabilities will contribute to the peace and stability of the development of the AUKUS Pillar 2 and regional peace. Meanwhile, Australian Deputy Prime Minister / Defense Minister Richard Marles also echoed the point, describing Korea as value-sharing country which has strategic alignment with Australia. Also, during the meeting, the two countries discussed a range of issues of common interest across the board, from expanding cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, the defense industry, and efforts to address North Korea's evolving military threats. South Korea and Australia also reaffirmed their commitment to further developing bilateral future-oriented relationship, including enhancing the joint military training, such as the mutual participation in last year's multilateral Talisman Saber exercise and Korea's Freedom Shield exercises.
Yeah, who's not going to like this is China. There's two sort of security alliance groups, right? There's AUKUS and then there's the bigger one, the Quad. And there was some growing calls for South Korea to join the Quad. I mean, would it be called the Quad anymore, right? It would be like Penta, what was 5? Penta. Anyways, they knew that the repercussion of that was not going to be good. And so the next plan was for South Korea to be a participating member of the Quad. And this is kind of like the other way around with the Pillar 2, with AUKUS. Although they're not going to be directly in there, they are going to be some kind of a participating member of this, which I think still China is not going to be very happy with this. But they haven't really shown any other sort of, before it used to be that China would kind of slap back with different measures in place that would hit Korea hard. But I think China hasn't been doing this anymore because they can't further isolate themselves anymore right now, considering the situation. So that's that. And, whoa, boy, this gentleman here already, even before the November presidential election, making some noise on Korea Peninsula issues. Former U.S. President Donald Trump hinting at the potential withdrawal of U.S. troops from South Korea if the country does not agree to increase the share of defense costs. This is not the first time that he's mentioned this before, and I must have said the word peanuts so many times. Every time we talk about this, he had threatened to basically withdraw the USFK if not for a significant contribution to the United States. And of course, we do know that the defense cost negotiations have already begun. They're in talks right now. They're saying they're trying to speed this up in case that Trump comes back into office. Yang, let's get the latest on this.
Sure. So in his recent interview with Time magazine, Trump expressed dissatisfaction with the current arrangement, stating, I'm using the direct quote here, "I want South Korea to treat us properly. I had negotiations because they were paying virtually nothing for 40,000 troops that we had there. We have 40,000 troops in a somewhat precarious position, to put it mildly." He also added, quote, "Why would we defend somebody? We are talking about a very wealthy country. Why wouldn't they want to pay?"
That was a terrible Trump impression. But,
So Time magazine actually interpreted this as an indication that Trump might consider pulling out U.S. troops if these negotiations do not result in increased South Korean contributions. Now, historically, the two countries have regularly negotiated the Special Measures Agreement, or SMA. That is something that outlines the costs South Korea should bear for the U.S. military presence on the peninsula. Now, Trump's stance on defense cost sharing is consistent with his broader view of alliances as transactional relationships. And in response to this kind of stance, the U.S. Congress in 2019 included provisions in its National Defense Act to prevent the president from arbitrarily reducing troop levels in Korea. Now, this development is also coinciding with broader discussions about defense commitments globally, that including NATO nations, where Trump has also been vocal about member countries meeting their financial obligations. And this was also mentioned in this Time magazine interview. He said, quote, "If you're not going to pay, then you're on your own."
Yeah, Trump is actually not too wrong when it comes to the NATO contribution, because I think there is a certain percentage that initially that all agreed to pay for, and some of the countries were not actually meeting the contribution level. However, the issue with the Korean Peninsula and the upkeep of the U.S. forces Korea, I mean, it's there's something that the United States is also benefiting as well by stationing their troops there. Yes, they are protecting South Korea, but also they are placing themselves strategically very close to North Korea, China, and now Russia. And so it was supposed to be a win-win situation, a give and take kind of a situation here. But as you know, Trump is a businessman before anything else. 17 members of the regional branch of the main opposition Democratic Party visiting Dokdo on Tuesday to condemn Japan's territorial claims of Dokdo. As you know, their recent diplomatic blue book indicating false claims of Dokdo once again. Annually, this happens. Haejang, let's get the details of this.
Right. 17 members of the Dokdo Defense Group of the DP's Gyeonggi Party traveled to Dokdo on Tuesday to condemn Japan's claim to the islets. DP lawmakers visited Dokdo and condemned Japan's territorial claim of Dokdo, saying that the land is a symbol of our unique territory and sovereign nation, and that Japan's claim over the islands is absolutely unacceptable. The Democratic Party of Gyeonggi Province plans to continue to organize visits by active lawmakers to the islands to reaffirm territorial sovereignty. Meanwhile, the Japanese government issued a statement in protest of the South Korean lawmakers' visit. The Japanese Foreign Ministry said that despite Japan's prior request to stop, South Korean lawmakers landed on Takeshima, which is Japan's name for Dokdo, and they added that Takeshima is clearly Japan's inherent territory in light of historical facts, also under international law, and strongly demanded that these visits be prevented from happening again.
I wonder if South Koreans need a visa or a passport to go into Dokdo. No. I wonder if our cell phones work in Dokdo, or is it roaming? It's not roaming in Dokdo, so hence number 2 million something reasons for why Dokdo is still South Koreans. Guys, thank you very much for coming in on Labor Day with your reports. Have a safe one, and looking forward to seeing you guys again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang Radio application, or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.